Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. In the 4th year of the presidency of Barack Obama, Nathan Deal being governor of the great state of Georgia and Kasim Reed, mayor of the great city of Atlanta, the word of the Lord continues to come through the prophet Isaiah. What's fascinating, folks, is the punctuation of the text. I think it's wrong. The New Revised Standard Version has it, as we read this morning, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. In other words, the voice, you can hear and see that the voice comes from out there, in the wilderness, in the boondocks, somewhere beyond Hiram. The word comes from out there to those of us who are in here, who are not in the wilderness, who are blessed not to have to live in the boondocks. And my fear is, if that's the way we think of it, that the word, the voice coming from out here to those of us who are, Jerry, in here, we can dismiss that voice as if it is too radical, too irrelevant, too not mainstream, because it's for somebody else, not us. But what if you change the colon? What if instead of it saying the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, what if it's meant to say the voice of one crying, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord? You see the difference? If the colon is after the word crying, then what's in the wilderness is not the voice, but the one about whom the voice speaks. The one who has come to lift up the valleys and make low the mountains. He can be experienced in the wilderness, not apart from the wilderness. In other words, the wilderness, folks, is not a place to which the voice comes from, but a place where the voice comes to. Do you see the difference? The image behind me is of Seaside Heights, New Jersey. Anybody ever been to Seaside Heights, New Jersey? Then you know it's 60 miles north of Atlantic City. It's one of the epicenters of Superstorm Sandy. What once used to be a nice, quiet, reserved resort town was overnight changed into a wilderness. And folks, I don't have to tell anybody in the room that you could go to Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, look up the word wilderness, and you will find all different kinds. Someone is diagnosed with a life-threatening disease and the entire family goes into a turmoil. Addictions to sex or family or money or drugs or alcohol or rear its ugly head. A job is lost and a person or a person's family faces financial insecurity. A man's priorities is all screwed up. A woman is held captive by fear. A congregation is overwhelmed by arrogance. The reason the prophet Isaiah's words are so profound is that the wilderness still exists. In Isaiah's time, the wilderness was bondage to the Persians. In our time, it seems bondage to everything else. So, I would like for every one of us in the room to hear once again these powerful words, the way I think they should be read. The voice of one crying, colon, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Into the wilderness he came once. Into the wilderness he comes still. To heal and make whole. To embrace and to love. To find the lost and welcome the stranger. Every valley will be lifted up and every addiction healed and every illness cured. The promise of the gospel is that there is no mountain he won't climb. No bondage he won't set free from. No death he will not destroy. The promise of the gospel is that he comes in the middle of it all. I want to tell you a story, and I apologize to you ahead of time that I've already told most of you this story. Please bear with me because I think it's just absolutely appropriate to the occasion. And I think it's a true story. One day the curtain parted on a blank stage, and the stage was complete. Remember the story? The stage was completely black, except for right in the middle of the stage, there was a beam of light shining down on it. And in the middle of that beam of light, there's a man down on his all fours looking for something. And a police officer comes by and says, "Excuse me, sir, did you lose something?" And the guy says, "Yes, I lost my keys." And the police officer says, "May I help you look for them?" "Sure." So the police officer gets down on his hands and knees. In 10 minutes, they're looking for the keys. And after 10 minutes, the police officer stands up and stretches his back and says, "Excuse me, sir, but we've looked at this place for 10 minutes and they're not here. Are you sure you lost them here?" And the guy says, "No. I lost them over there," pointing to the darkest corner of the stage. And the police officer scratches his head and says, "Well, then why aren't you looking for them over there?" And the guy in all seriousness says, "Because there's no light over there. There's no light over there." The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. If you want to see him, chances are it's in the darkest corners of your world that you will find him. Because he comes in places and people we least expect him. To hold us close and to carry us home. Maybe it's best said using the words of the Apostles' Creed. You remember them. He descended into hell. In some sense, he's still there. Because in some sense, so are we. The voice of one crying in the wilderness, right here, prepare the way of the Lord.